Sides and totals have been on the move for the college football semifinals, so let's discuss. Greg McElroy, kind enough to join us. Greg, before we get into anything else, you and McDonough, fantastic work on the call for the Sugar Bowl. Would have appreciated some acknowledgement of the first half under cashing despite the chaos at the end of the first half, but you guys were lights out. Great job.
No, I want to know why that wasn't the first thing out of my mouth instead of the Bo Collins touchdown. Why wouldn't I reference the fact that they went for it, got the short field, and almost burned your ticket there at the end?
Yeah, what a mistake by Georgia here. Fortenbaugh has just got to be miserable as everyone around the country is like, what is this guy talking about? All right, but they'll understand what you're talking about here. You know how this works, right? We watch a team like Ohio State play their best game of the season, absolutely annihilate an undefeated team like Oregon, and now there are the overreactions. There's the market movement. Buckeyes go from 4.5 up to 6 against Texas. Are we overestimating it? Like, are we starting to find some value on Texas here, or is Ohio State really this nasty?
You know what's funny is I actually think it's an overreaction in two different areas. Not only do we have the overreaction in favor of Ohio State, we have the overreaction in favor of, well, Texas almost lost. Yeah, Texas also had a 16-point lead, lost 2 game-winning field goals, and failed to cover as a 2-touchdown favorite. But we're in control of that game really up until the very end. So I think that we're getting Texas on sale. I also think when you look at momentum and how Quinn Ewers finished that game in the last 5 minutes of the game in overtime, he threw for 197 yards in the fourth quarter in overtime. That's the second most in his career. Sometimes when you finish like that, it can carry over into the next performance. And I think when you try to go match-based defense against Ohio State, you're dead. Because if you think your guy can cover Jeremiah Smith, you're wrong. It's not going to happen. Texas plays zone. So it's not going to be as much about individual matchups. It's really going to be more about the bigger picture and can Ohio State take advantage of it. And this is the best defensive line that Ohio State has faced since Michigan. And I think Texas might be even deeper than Michigan. So I like Texas getting the points. And I also think this game's going to be lower scoring than some experts might think as well.
All right, that's interesting because I wanted to follow up with this. Steve Sarkisian's kind of a master with how he scripts games early. We've seen Texas get out and score in both playoff games, and that goes through his history prior to this point as well. Ohio State's defense looked incredible against Oregon. Caleb Downs has been an absolute beast, but if the Buckeyes can find their way to scoring, and on the other side, Sarkisian has a good script, first half over 26.5. That's what I was looking at, but I feel like you're not going to be with me on that one.
I'm not with you there. I actually think both defense are going to keep it close to best. I like first half under, second half over, because both these coaching staffs do such a great job. However, it is a slightly condensed time frame from the last game. Now, they played on the 1st. Both teams, Texas and Ohio State, they'll have until the 10th, so they have 9 days. But I think when you look at Steve Sarkisian and Chip Kelly, a lot of their game planning in the last 2 games, they had ample time to be able to put that plan in place. I also think there was some familiarity with Chip Kelly having played Oregon before, so I think there's a little less familiarity going against this style of attack, knowing how Texas is going to structure their defense to defend Ohio State's weapons. So I think it could be a process of trial and error, feeling each other out. So I'd lean under in the first half, and then I especially like under in the first quarter, because I don't know if you can keep the lids on these offenses for more than 15 minutes.
All right, Orange Bowl, great uniform matchup between Penn State and Notre Dame. Now, the last 3 games where we saw Penn State and marquee matchups, 35 points per game. But it came against Oregon, SMU, and Boise State. Notre Dame's defense, possibly a step up in class. It's got me thinking about the under here. What do you think about this matchup?
Here's the thing that scares me about the under. SMU and Boise State turned it over 7 times. They had 2 pick sixes, Penn State did. And it's not that I was on the under at all in that game. But it might have been something, a little something that I think about. But I also look at the short field that can be created. You also look at Notre Dame. They lead the country in takeaways. They've forced 31 this year. And their offense, and defense in some cases, has turned those 31 takeaways into 148 points. Both defenses can score. Notre Dame's got 5 pick sixes on the year and 6 defensive touchdowns, and they just returned a kick to the house. We've also seen big plays become a big part of this Penn State offense. And while I have tons of respect for both defenses, and I think both offenses, they're not really mistake prone. They're not going to put the ball in harm's way. Notre Dame They only lost a turnover margin in one game this year. That was against NIU way back in week 2. So neither team's going to take a lot of unnecessary risks, but I think both teams know with the aggressiveness that they're going to play defensively, you're going to have to take some shots, which could lead to big plays. So I lean over slightly, and partly because of where we're at as far as the big plays that could be created and the short fields that could be created as well.
I mean, you're getting a good price. Well, there's one book that opened this as high as 50.5. I know another book that opened 48.5. Now we're sitting down 45.5. So if you like the over, you've avoided all of that early movement. You settle in to a nice number. Talking about that Penn State defense, Abdul Carter had the arm injury in the Boise matchup. He didn't return in the second half. How does that affect your handicap in this game?
Well, it's massive, I think, and part of it might have to do with that sack fumble possibility that we just described a second ago. Abdul Carter, I think he's going to go. It's a left shoulder. We don't know for sure. They really just said left arm. I'm assuming it's left shoulder based on how the trainers, I've watched the TV copy 15 different times in the last couple of days. The trainers were looking at the shoulder area. So it's an assumption, but I think it's a safe assumption at this point. He's a game wrecker, and it can completely alter how Notre Dame structures their offense. If number 11 is over there on the right side of the end of the line of scrimmage, I know I need to have a tight end over there. I need to have a running back over there. So now those two guys who would normally be out in the route, they're having to stay in protection, which avoids the linebacker mismatch that Penn State might have covering the tight ends for Notre Dame and or the running backs for Notre Dame. So I think it's a very significant injury that you need to be keeping an eye on. And according to James Franklin, he's great mentally, but it is truly going to be a game-time decision that we'll find out in the pregame.
Quickly, I wanted to get your thoughts. The winner of that game, what are their chances against the winner of Ohio State, Texas?
I think it's a very real matchup. I know people are going to look at Ohio State, they're going to look at Texas, but if you really want to take a flyer and you look at some of the prices that you can get with Penn State and with Notre Dame, these teams, they can play man coverage and they can rush the passer. Like, those two things are significant. If you can play man coverage and win your one-on-ones and rush the passer and stop the run, all those things together create a lot of problems for the opposing team. And while I know Ohio State has improved, I'm a believer in Texas and their personnel, I know that defensive lines have given Ohio State problems this year, and no defensive lines have given Texas problems at times this year. Texas, for instance, against Georgia, gave up like 1 billion sacks. And I think they ran for like 60 yards combined in those two games against Georgia. So defensive lines, with what Penn State and Notre Dame have, I think they can neutralize that advantage. There is an advantage, no one's denying that, but it can be neutralized with the creativity and the athleticism that those teams have on the other side.